Hello and welcome. My name is Zafar Iqbal and you are watching the Mojo Story. Even before the official report into the Air India crash is out, we hope it will be out today only or maybe tomorrow. Selective media leaks are already out and that has sparked outrage and dismay within the pilot community. Many seem see them as a calibrated attempt to blame two dead pilots and deflect scrutiny from Boeing. Reports focusing on fuel switch miss a critical point. If the switch were cut and reset, the pilots were only following Boeing's own emergency checklist for a dual engine failure, which is a rare and a catastrophic situation. Instead, instead of rather focusing on the pilots only, as these leaks seem to have suggest, shouldn't we have a broader sort of a picture in our mind? Today, we're joined by Aditya Paranjpe, who's an associate professor of Monash University. Welcome to Mojo Story, sir. You must have seen this selective leaks today also in the Wall Street Journal that seem to suggest that it's a human error and not a machine error. Even though the report is not out yet officially, why is Boeing's role not under equal or greater scrutiny? And why is the public narrative veering towards blaming pilots only, as it seemed to suggest in the last couple of reports that we're seeing today is also in the Wall Street Journal?
Okay, thank you very much, Zafarji. So first off, I did see the Wall Street Journal story just a while ago. So let me first point out that the preliminary accident investigation report is more of a statement of facts. So I think this particular theme about the fuel control switches first came from this source called Air Current, if I'm not mistaken, and it was picked up by
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
multiple sources in the media.
Yeah.
What's also
Yeah.
worth noting is that Air Current itself stated in that same post that this is just a preliminary. This is where they're currently looking at. It is not conclusive. But having
Right.
said that, moving on from there, the preliminary investigation report, like I said, is a statement of facts. It is not conclusive, and the way I think this process will unfold is that it will basically be like a root cause analysis. So
Yeah.
starting with, let's say, the possibility of dual engine failure, they look at every
Mm.
single thing that can lead to dual engine failure,
Right.
and then depending on how things get eliminated, they'll be eliminated. Some might stay with a higher probability, and they'll be eliminated gradually to get to the root cause. So I think at this point we shouldn't read too much into what these articles have said. Remember, we are just about a month into the investigation, and the preliminary report will only just say what's being investigated. So when I first read this is now kind of my personal interpretation. I should have thought, okay, if engines have failed, if they want to rule out pilot error, then that's the first thing that they will want to look at, because the process of ruling out pilot error, I mean, if you look at it logically, starts with the assumption
Yeah.
that they have made a mistake, and then you show that
Yeah.
it could not have happened. So I think them looking into the possibility of pilot error is very normal.
Yeah.
I don't think conclusions have been drawn in any of those reports. So what I probably found a little disturbing when as I read the media reports, is the interpretation that some fingers were being pointed at the pilots, and I think that's not what's going on, and I'm not sure why the Wall Street Journal seems to suggest that the Boeing's got a clean sheet. I don't think that's what's going on at all.
Now, if to get a sense of the technical things of it, if there is an engine flame out, both the engines have failed, or if there is an electric error. Now, what is pilot supposed to do? Is supposed to follow the rule book. What is
Absolutely.
what he should do at that point in time, even if he has switched off the engines and then switched on the engines. That is, he's just following the rule book, because if the engines have failed, he switch them off, then switch them on. It takes just 1 second, and he may
Absolutely.
not be in a position to understand whether it's an electric failure or it's an engine failure. That's the basic instinct. On your screen you can see the manual. We have taken it
Yes.
out. The manual exactly says that if there is a
Absolutely.
dual engine, then the pilot just switch it off and switch it on. So he was just following the SOP. He was doing nothing more
Absolutely.
than that.
No, no, and that's the reason why no matter where you find the fuel switch, whether it's seen to be in the off position or the on position in the artifacts that remain from the accident, it doesn't say anything about what happened in the interim. So I think it's only when we see the FDR data that there'll be some indication there of what the pilots did. Plus, my assumption now is that as they carry out these steps, even in that situation, these are professional pilots. They'll be calling out what they're doing. So you have the captain and the first officer. So when they go through the steps, they'll say what they've done, and so it should be picked up on the CVR. So if it says on the CVR that they've tried to turn the engine off in the process of relighting it, then we know they've just been following procedure. And I think
Right.
as you also pointed out in one of your earlier segments, this entire episode lasted 32 seconds, of which almost the first
Yes.
25% normal. So 20 seconds or 20, 25 seconds to execute a relight is not an easy task at all. So I really wouldn't
Right.
want to insinuate anything at this point, and the pilots are being blamed at all. And
Right.
honestly, if
No.
that's what
What?
news channels have picked up, we should just be telling them that, please don't do that. We are not doing the public a service by insinuating anything at this point. I would still say
Right.
wait for the report. Let AI
Yes.
make a public statement. Let's also trust
Hmm.
the system. Let's trust NTSB. And hopefully then someone comes out and says what's actually happened.
Right. So the point is that whatever the pilots did, they did in response to a situation. A situation had risen, and the pilots responded to that. Now the situation is there because of anything. It can be a failure of electric failure, it can be an engine failure, although very rare. There are four generators, electric failure is unheard of. So they're just following the things that they are made to do, that they are supposed to do at that time. So their response comes in the second place. The first is an action that's happened. They have a very limited span of time, just 15 seconds. So whatever they could do at that time, they did it. So now we'll have to wait till the report comes out. But in all these stories that we're seeing so far, they seem to be tilted more towards a human error rather than a machine error. That is the sense one gets. We'll have to wait for the final report nevertheless.
Yes, you're right. And look, when investigations happen, remember, this is something we do in math all the time, what are called as proofs
Yeah.
by contradiction. That if you have to prove that
Yeah.
something hasn't happened, start off by assuming that it has happened and show that sequence is unlikely or likely to
Yeah.
lead to some fallacious conclusions. And I think that is what's probably going on right now, and that's what they will do. Um, let's also not forget that one thing that's clearly said by ICAO
Yeah.
is that the end product of any accident investigation is recommendations to make sure that accidents are not repeated again.
Yeah.
However, as you go through the report and you point out what the causes are, there is also an implicit responsibility that is placed on somebody's shoulders, even though that is not
Yeah.
the objective of the report. It is not a statement of blame, it's a statement of changes. And
Yeah.
consequently, when that report gets prepared, they will want arguments that are absolutely watertight, which means someone shouldn't come and ask, well, let's assume that somebody says something about the software. How do you know it isn't the pilots? So to show that it isn't the pilots, you still have to go through this entire logical process. And it's possible that that's where they are right now. And someone just picked it up and said, oh, look, they're pointing at the pilots. No, they are not.
Then.
So I would be very cautious about the media telling people anything to that effect, because that's not, I
Right.
don't believe that's what's happened. And also, let's not
Right.
forget that in all of this, there are, I mean, we of course have the pilots that we really have to look out for, but we also have Boeing and we have Air India, and broadly we have the Indian aviation. And quite frankly, they have a lot to lose if something goes wrong. They have a lot to gain by making it right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we have to trust them to do their jobs correctly.
But do you feel that the report will be out? Is it important, or is it mandatory for the report to come out within a month, the preliminary report, or it can be delayed even more now?
I don't know the procedure of honestly, I'm not an expert on the investigation process. So it really comes down to whatever I've read in the days that
Yeah.
follow. So ideally, there is like a recommended time period that the preliminary investigations report should be out in a month, final report in a
Yeah.
year. But really, it depends on AIB now, uh,
Right.
to what they are comfortable putting out at this point. My personal view on this, again, as maybe someone who's been looking at some side of it technically now, is that there
Yeah.
is no harm in coming up with a report, at least telling people the exact sequence of events. So, for
Right.
instance, if you remember, in the early days, there was talk of things other than engine failure.
Yeah.
So, if if even if they come out with a preliminary report that clarifies was there dual engine failure conclusively, then that already eliminates a lot of the other side discussions that happened subsequently.
Yeah.
So at least, and again, remember, at this point, you have the technical community that's happy to wait until the final report is out. But really, what's also like what should happen really is the government talking to the people, telling them that look, this is what seems to have happened. We are on it. We are on top of the situation, and we are working to make this as safe as possible for you. So I think that is the message that's going to come out of the preliminary report primarily. It's for the people. It's
You-
not so much for the technical community at this point. We we
right.
are we are happy to wait.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And when this incident happened, we spoke to you and we discussed several possibilities: engine failure, sabotage. I remember contaminated fuel. Now, a lot of time has passed. What is the sense that you get now? A month has passed. Things are same what we were discussing that point in time, or you think that more thought is being given to more, there's more perspective to it, and things seem to be narrowing down towards some sort of a conclusion now, or it's the same that we discussed on the first day?
I think it's so in the sense that it's same in the sense that I think it's generally accepted, at least by the set of people that I talk to, that it looks like it's dual engine failure. No one's discussing an incorrectly configured aircraft or so. That's no longer happening. However, with an airplane of the 787, the sense that I've got again talking to some engineers, pilots, is that the systems inside are so complex that after a point, unless you've actually been trained on that aircraft, the exact sequence of events are very difficult to trace back. So again, if you there are some select blog posts, select articles that have highlighted this complexity. I mean, for example, on this show itself, one of the panelists pointed out that after takeoff, the landing gear had pitched down, which means the retraction process had started. But somebody else pointed
Yeah.
out, including an engineer that I spoke to, that actually the well hadn't opened. And now there's a little technicality here, which is what is the sequence of
Hmm.
commands? Where does the power go from? Where do these two mechanisms draw power from? And these are so intricate, so specific to the system that unless we know the diagrams, it's impossible to tell what's gone wrong or what hasn't. And see, that's the level of complexity. And that's the reason why even I think a lot of us have been extremely cautious about making a comment because we appreciate the complexity. And what may
Yeah.
seem to be obvious is not at all once you look at that
Mhm.
system.
Yeah. And I remember when you came to our show on the first day, you had a model with you, and you demonstrated what could have happened, and you said that perhaps both the engine failed and it lost the thrust and it just fell down. But if that is the case, then the pilots did the right thing, which is according to the manual, they have to just switch off the gears, and they have to switch on the engines once again. It may take a second or 2 seconds, and during that time the plane loses the thrust and there is a tendency that it would fall down. So technically the pilots did the right thing if engine fail, and an electric
Okay.
failure is a very rare thing to happen.
So Zafar, first off, see, no one's talked about what the pilots have done. That will become clear.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but only once someone looks at the preliminary report. We don't yet know the sequence of actions that the pilots have taken.
Yeah.
So ideally, the preliminary report should say that on the CVR, this is what seems to have happened. The FDR says something similar. We haven't seen anything
Yeah.
of that sort yet. So we shouldn't be talking about actions that the pilots have taken because we don't know what they've done. Now, having said
Yeah.
that, if it is dual engine out, that is the two engines have failed, there'll be a relight procedure. But during this entire window, until the engines relight, if at all they do, they are not going to produce any useful thrust any which ways. So during that period, thrust is
Yeah.
fully gone, and the
Yeah.
plane's going to continue to sink.
Yeah. And I remember you
And
said that it's sort of it sunk down. It did not tilt towards one side, and
it
it
did
fell
not
down
tilt.
like on both the sides. It was the
It was
equal.
it was almost yeah. It felt like
It
it
was
was
losing the
gliding
thrust
down.
both sides. Yeah.
It felt like it was gliding down. I mean, but look, the engines are off, so it's very draggy. Landing gear is down, that worsens the drag. So it's really gliding down in whatever way it can. Of course, it's a steep glide because of all the extra drag. But no, it's not falling, which means it hasn't stalled,
Yeah.
and it hasn't spun out either. So a lot of those things get ruled out. You know.
Absolutely.
Um,
And yes, yes, sir.
no, please go ahead. Please.
No, I'm saying that Boeing has in the past accepted that there are some missteps. No machine is perfect at all. In fact, there is a sound bite that we can play before we go further.
And I'm committed to continue to work transparently with our regulators, and with Congress. Last month, on March 10th, marked the 6th anniversary of the tragic loss of passengers and crew members on Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. I know many victims' family members, as well as those from Lion Air Flight 610, are here today. And I want to extend my personal condolences for the painful loss of their loved ones on our aircraft and offer my pledge to make the necessary changes so this never happens again. Boeing made serious missteps in recent years, and it's unacceptable. In response, we've made sweeping changes to the people, processes, and overall structure of our company. While there's still work ahead, these profound changes are underpinned by deep commitment from all of us to the safety of our products and services. This commitment to aviation goes well beyond Boeing. We play a crucial role in the U.S. economy and the national security, as evidenced by the U.S. Air Force recent selection of Boeing to build the world's first sixth-generation fighter jet, the F-47.
US economy and national security, also the points that he has added, besides saying that there are some missteps that are there. But again, coming back, are the pilots expected to improvise, or they're just following the SOP that is given to them? Because they have very little time to react. It's basically the instinct that they have. What exactly happens when such a massive emergency crops up in front of them? It's just 32 seconds. We saw in that video, the moment the flight takes off, in 32 seconds it got converted into a ball of fire and it's just fallen down.
So I think the instinct is to follow the SOPs. That's what
Yeah,
they're trained to do. Like engine
yeah,
relight. Sometimes pilots will talk about flying by the seat of your pants, which is like stick and rudder kind of flying. Engine relight is not one of those. Engine relight is an engineering issue. It requires a very procedural approach to relight it. So if the pilots thought that they had a shot at relighting the engine, they would have followed the SOPs down to the T. Other than that, it's very difficult to guess. I think considering the plane actually flew straight,
yeah,
it hardly deviated. It doesn't look like, at least from that the pilot spotted any other area that they could hope to land at. Otherwise, you would have,
yeah,
had this seen something to either side of the airplane, they would have tried to turn the airplane and get it into that patch. But we don't seem to see that. We don't seem to see the airplane doing that, which leads me to believe that they would have probably just tried to relight the engine. There was no
yeah.
other
If there is a
place where they
if there is an
could land.
engine failure, they are trying to switch it off and switch it on again, so as uh, that's what they are supposed to do. But suppose there is an electric failure. There is an electric failure and not an engine failure. There are four generators, we're told, in that
Yes.
in such aircraft. Is an electric failure, does that even happen, or is the rarest of the rare cases that there can be an electric failure on a machine like
So,
this?
so it's a rarest of the rare kind of a situation. But remember, if the electric failure does happen, you still have the ram air turbine, and the ram air turbine deploys, and as soon as it starts spinning, it generates a fair bit of electric power as well. So these airplanes have a massive amount of redundancy built in at every single stage. The ram
Yeah.
air turbine is a backup solution for not just the electric power but also for hydraulics. So if you look
Hmm.
at the airplane at a very basic level, from the point of view of flying the airplane safely, it's the electric power and the hydraulics that together supply enough authority for control. And the idea is, if you can control the airplane, you can fly it safely. I mean, the engines, however, are not in that league. The engines are a separate system in their own right. So the rack
Hmm.
coming out can generate electric power, can generate hydraulics, but cannot obviously power up the engines. The engine power is a separate story. So
Yeah.
if the engine shut down,
Yeah.
then even if you have electric power, even if you have enough hydraulic power, the most you can do is try and glide safely. So, for
Yeah.
example, there was, I think, Air Transat flight 236. If I hope I've got the number right. It
Yeah.
lost power over the Atlantic, but at that point, with the RAT deployed, they still had enough electric power, enough hydraulic power. They were able to glide. I think I forget the distance now, but almost 100-ish kilometers, and then
Hmm.
execute a safe landing. So that's what you can do even with the engines out if you are at a good altitude and you have enough control authority. At low altitudes, there's just not any
Yeah.
distance available to you. So if you lose power, the control authority is only good to the point where if the engines relight, you can fly safely again. But otherwise, honestly, there is very little possibility of survival from there on.
Unfortunately, the altitude was very less
It was
here.
very
The
low.
pilots,
Absolutely.
the pilots would have tried to move the aircraft from a place where they thought there would be more impact on the ground. That's why the tail hit that building. Perhaps they are trying to glide it away to an open area. God knows, but the altitude was very less. The time it had just taken off.
Absolutely. And look, even if an airplane is configured for an optimal glide, I mean, which obviously this plane wasn't. Landing gear was down, flaps were out and whatnot. But even if you can configure a plane for an optimal glide, your descent rate is almost 800-ish feet per minute, 700 to 800 feet per minute. So even with that, even in the best case, from 400 feet above the ground level, you have just half a minute, right? And if the engine doesn't relight, that is the end of the story. And there are
Right.
other technical details that are in there. So, for example, even if the engines relight, it takes a bit of time for the flight path to recover before you start
Hmm.
climbing. So, it's also an academic point that even if the engines had managed to relight, hypothetically, let's say 50 feet or 100 feet above ground, would that have meant
Hmm.
the airplane would have survived? No, I don't know. It's not very obvious. So there are all
Right.
these extra technical issues in there that come up and really show you that limited time, limited altitude, engines out almost implies no possibility of survival. And again, I
Right.
think also I pointed out in one of the videos, just given how densely the area is
Yeah.
populated right outside the
Yeah.
airport, there was no place also to attempt a safe landing. So what's
Right.
happened in the past, I think so. I remember this one episode again. I keep forgetting the exact name of the airline, but they were
Yeah.
able to land on a huge grassy patch outside New Orleans on a levee because that
Hmm.
open patch was available. So even with engine out, you could effect a landing. Unfortunately, in this case, that did not
Yeah.
exist. So it's really
That
unfortunate.
they didn't have that possibility. But you feel that once this report will be out, the preliminary report only, there'll be some clarity now what exactly happened.
Absolutely. So again, a lot of things. So I think that, like I said, it's a question of ruling things out as well. So people talked about things like stall that will hopefully get ruled out.
Hmm.
Dual engine failure, we talk about it as a highly probable cause. If that is
Hmm.
what has happened, it will get ruled in very strongly. So it
Hmm.
gives people a focus, even people in the technical community. But it, like I said earlier, it is mainly for the flying public to feel assured that things are being done. But equally,
Yeah.
I should also point out that a preliminary report is preliminary in the sense that its conclusions can change because
Right.
early evidence can subsequently get overturned as you build up more evidence, as you build up more data, as you run more scenarios, as you start eliminating possibilities. So I would
Yeah.
again sort of still urge listeners that yes, do
Yeah.
look at the report if it
Yeah.
helps you, but please do wait for the final report. Until then, do not jump to a conclusion. And
Right.
even as someone might feel tempted to blame Boeing or blame Air India or whoever,
Yeah.
please,
Yeah.
we are at the end of the day, we are all on the same team. We are trying to make aviation safer.
Yeah.
We are trying to
Yeah.
make it better for everyone. So please trust the
Yeah.
system, is what I would say
Absolutely.
personally.
And there will be lessons to learn from this accident, such a horrific accident, that's happened, and it shattered so many lives. Thanks so much, Aditya ji, for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts. And thanks to all our viewers for watching the Mojo Story. Indeed, we'll keep a track of this story and follow all those developments when the report will be out.
Okay.
Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you very much, Safarji. Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.